testimony. And finally, staff will make any closing comments. This is a hybrid public hearing with both in-person and remote participation. Before starting your testimony, please provide your first and last name, as well as your mailing address. For our in-person participants, if you wish to testify, please add your name to the sign-up sheet up here. I will use this list to call up participants for their testimony. After your name is called, please come up to one of the tables up front here before beginning your testimony. For our remote participants, if you want to testify, you must be logged into Zoom or have called in using the Zoom dial-in option. When Hearings Officer Rapelier asks if anyone attending remotely would like to testify, you will need to use the raise hand feature to notify staff. To do this, you'll need to press the raise hand button on your computer or smart device, or if you've called in with a phone, dial *9. In addition to oral testimony, if anyone has written testimony to submit, please hand that to me. If you are in person, please submit your written testimony to me after you've testified. And if you're participating remotely, you can submit your written testimony to me via email. And my email address is up on the screen. It's audrey.stewart@deschutes.org. And with that, I will turn it over to Hearings Officer Rapelier for some hearing instructions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stewart. As Ms. Stewart described, we are following the normal hearing procedures in the county code, and I will provide sufficient opportunity for everyone to participate at the appropriate time. I ask for your patience as we make sure we get to each of these steps she just outlined. This application is to be considered through a quasi-judicial process. I will consider only the factual evidence that is in the record. I will then apply those facts to any relevant provisions of the county's comprehensive plan and land use regulations. The standards and applicable criteria relevant to this hearing were identified in the public notice announcing this hearing. They are also set forth in the staff report. The public notice and the staff report are posted on the county's website. They are also available directly from staff upon request. It's important that you direct all your testimony to the standards and applicable criteria. If you believe a criterion applies that was not listed, you may address the unlisted criteria. However, I urge you also to explain why the criterion must apply and to do so with such specificity so that other participants may respond and so that I can address that issue in my decision. The failure to raise an issue with enough detail to enable me or the other participants to respond precludes your ability to appeal that issue to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Also, the failure to raise a constitutional or other issue relating to any proposed conditions of approval with enough detail to allow me to respond to the issue in my decision precludes an action for damages in circuit court. As I just noted, I serve as the county's hearings officer in this matter. In that role, my job is to be a neutral decision maker. Just for the matter, I've been an attorney for over 34 years. I've done land use law for 32 years. I've never represented an applicant. I've never represented a developer or an opponent to it. I've always represented local governments. And that's why I have a contract to serve in this role. I'm obligated to remain impartial and do not represent the county's interests or any other participant. To that end, I'll state for the record, I do not have any relationships with the applicant. I'm not aware of any connections I may have with other participants in this proceeding that would prevent me from remaining impartial. I have communicated with staff, but only to discuss the particulars of today's hearing and not the substance of the application. I do not have any ex parte contacts to disclose. Although I'm somewhat familiar with the Sun River, and I must have driven by this place a number of times in my lifetime. I've been a lifelong Oregonian, so it is my obligation to preside over this hearing in an efficient manner. And so, can I determine how many people have signed up to testify?
There.
And on Zoom? Okay, well, we'll get to that, I guess, when we get to it. Okay. Does anyone wish to challenge my ability to hear this matter or the county's jurisdictions of this? Over this? Seeing none and nothing from Zoom? I can tell you that I've reviewed all the materials in the record. The latest materials I've reviewed are Mr. Patera's 530 and 531 submittals. If there's any other additional submittals, please request that you submit those today. And so I get a chance to review them before I make my decision. And so now I will turn back to Ms. Stewart to deliver the staff report.
Thank you, hearings officer. And before I begin my staff report, I realized I skipped a section in my script. So I do want to jump back for a second and note first that the hearings officer and staff are responsible for conducting an orderly hearing. Any testimony or behavior which is inappropriate will be addressed and may result in that member of the public being removed from the hearing. And the second is I want to verify, are there any objections to the format of the hearing? If you're attending remotely and have an objection, please use the raise hand function. If you're in the room, please raise your hand.
Question?
Sure. What's your question, sir?
My name is Ed Patera. The question is on the time limits. We've got 4 people here in, hopefully 4 people on Zoom call. We've composited our comments. I will present them as a moderator, but that consolidation came down to 30 pages of slides. We can whip through them quite.
Yep, I'm going to stick with the time limits. The applicants have the burden of the proof in this matter. So again, so you're the 4 appellants sitting right here. Okay, so though that time limit will apply to you, but then anybody else who's opposed to it gets the additional 3 minutes. You understand how that works? So if you 4 people are the appellants and you get that time limit, and then the anybody else who's on Zoom or potentially in the room. Yes, that's right. And I said basically Supreme Court opinions where people's lives are on the line, they get 20 minutes too. So it's not unheard of for judicial proceedings. Okay. So anything else, Ms. Stewart?
No, unless there are any other questions or objections, I'll begin my staff report.
Okay, thank you.
The subject property is approximately 9.85 acres in size, and it's zoned Sun River Community General District. It's surrounded by properties that are zoned Sun River Single Family Residential District and Sun River Multiple Family Residential District. There's also one adjoining property, which is also zoned Sun River Community General District, and this is under common ownership as the subject property. As part of this application, the property owner has proposed a future property line adjustment with this neighboring parcel. The subject property is developed with a number of uses, including a public works facility in the south portion of the property. The applicant has requested site plan approval to construct a new public works building, which will be used in conjunction with the existing public works facility on the property. The majority of the building will be dedicated to the storage of vehicles and equipment, but it will also include an employee break room, locker space, and office space. A timely appeal was filed on April 26 by several surrounding property owners. The notice of intent to appeal lists 6 individuals and 1 LLC as the appellants. Issues raised by the appeal are summarized as follows. There's insufficient screening and buffering, particularly to the south and east. There's compatibility issues with neighboring residences. The appellants describe existing noise and traffic issues and also say the new building will generate adverse visual impacts due to the increased size and proximity to neighboring residences. The appellants question whether the subject approval will modify or remove aspects of prior land use approvals for the public works facility, such as required landscaping and parking. Staff notes several concerns were raised regarding the timing of mailed notices. The procedure for mailed notices comes from section 2224.030 of Deschutes County's procedures ordinance, and the length of the appeal period comes from section 2232.015 of the procedures ordinance. Since this application has been under review, the planning division has also begun emailing notices to interested parties in addition to the mailed notice. Anyone who would like to add a mailing or emailed list to the interested parties list is encouraged to reach out to me. Since the staff report was mailed out on April 14th, 4 public comments have been received. This included 3 emails from the appellant as well as 1 email from a general member of the public. All comments received as of 5 p.m. today have been uploaded to the record, which is available at the link on the screen. And with that, staff is available for any questions from the hearings officer.
All right, thank you very much for the staff. So now we're going to have testimony from the applicant. Who here is representing the applicant and who's going to be testifying? Okay, just one person testifying?
We need to on rebuttal.
Okay, on rebuttal. Okay. All right, you have 30 minutes. You have the burden of proof on this matter, so you have 30 minutes. Do we have a timekeeper? Okay, okay, thank you. 5 minutes, let them know. Thank you.
You don't need to use it. It's fine.
Good evening, Mr. Rapelier.
Yeah, very good.
My name is James Lewis. I'm the general manager for the Sun River Owners Association. And I'm here tonight to address the appellant's points listed in the appeal. I'm not going to go through all of the applicable criteria that were addressed in the decision by Ms. Stewart. We agree with that decision. We agreed with conditions of approval. We did not appeal that. So overall, just I guess as an overview, what we focused on tonight is the 9-page submittal by the appellant, primarily page 8 of 9, which lists 9 either new or modified conditions of approval that were listed in new to what those that were listed in the staff's decision, findings and decision, or modified. So in that vein, it's the applicant's understanding that even though the appellant addressed other issues in the submitted appeal materials, the actual request is only for those 9 points. So that's what we're going to focus on. But overall, the applicant believes that it's important to note that many of the points included in this appeal were submitted by the appellant and surrounding property owners during the comment period. And the staff findings and decision and conditions of approval included therein took such into consideration. In fact, the applicant was requested to address such prior to the application being deemed complete. So we submitted additional information. We were deemed incomplete, and some of that information was specific to those comment letters. This factor is very important to establishing the thorough record of information in this matter and the staff consideration of such, including a site visit by staff. It's also important to note that the comments submitted from the appellant and neighbors that were not relevant or applicable to the specific criteria as per the instructions that were given, that were included in the record, were not used as a basis for the decision or conditions of approval. So the irrelevant material was not addressed in the decision. And I thank staff for adhering to the procedural requirements in that vein. Aside from the conditions of approval proposed by the appellant, many of the other issues in the appeal are not relevant and are based on assertions and speculative scenarios. They are not reliant on factual evidence in the record. They use terminology of what if and could, and do not meet the test of explaining how and why the applicant's proposal does not meet the relevant criteria or requires conditions of approval. It's the applicant's understanding that the appellant shares the same burden as the applicant to base their argument on factual information in the record and apply such to the relevant criteria. And that's why we're focusing on the 9 proposed conditions of approval on page 8 of 9, because a lot of what's in the beginning we don't feel addresses the criteria in a how and a why fashion. Other information submitted by the appellant discusses the desire to redesign the project by shifting the location of the building, reducing the height, altering the existing traffic pattern, etc. Again, items that were listed in the comment letters submitted to the record, but not found relevant or addressed due to the fact that there was no nexus to the proposal, such as rerouting the entire public works campus traffic pattern when the subject proposal was not generating any new traffic or creating any traffic issues. So therefore, no nexus, no ability to deny or to condition the approval. So now, I'm going to rely in the next part of my presentation on page 8 of 9, and in my handout, I attached that. So if you wanted to, I don't know if you needed to pull it and focus on those conditions. I'm not going to read the conditions proposed by the appellant, but the first one had to do with notice provided by the county or site plan approvals remain in force unless specifically identified. But essentially, the conditions of approval listed in the original staff decision, this is item number 1 on the appellant's conditions of approval. The conditions of approval listed in the original staff decision remain in place and are applicable for the entire lifespan of the project. The applicant knows that. There's no need for this to be stated as it is inherent in the original review, approval, and enforcement process administered by the county, meaning the way that it was written in that condition, we know that we have to abide by that for the lifespan of the project. So there's no need for that condition to be added. But also listed in there, the applicant is just noting, we have no control or authorization with regard to the county notification process. That's something that's, I think, being addressed to the county. However, we are aware that any changes to the site plan will require a new application and notification to surrounding property owners per the applicable county code, and we agree to that. Condition number 2, was addressing that the building is to be used solely by public works staff and for SROA vehicles. The staff review of the submitted application and the resulting findings and decision with the included conditions of approval is based upon the applicant's submittal and the information included in the record. The application was for a new or a replacement public works building to be used by public works staff for the work they perform and the storage of vehicles related to such work. Aside from the approval of the project as proposed, this is also addressed under condition A, so it's already included in that decision. Item number 3 has to do with the clear vision area. Condition K of the staff findings and decision states that the requirement for maintaining the clear vision area pursuant to Deschutes County Code 18.116.020A as a condition of approval, as an ongoing condition of approval for the life of the project, the applicant understands and agrees to maintain the clear vision areas on the property under their control. The appellant is referring here, talking about, do we have the ability, or why is there a requirement for clear vision area related to this project that is on property that we don't control, some neighboring properties. But in this instance, the applicant, we'd like to point out that the county code reference stands alone as a requirement for all properties, for all property owners adjacent to an intersection as described therein. And it's not applicable to those properties only as a result of this proposal. So in short, the code provision requires these property owners to maintain the clear vision area, even if this proposal was never submitted. So it's not specific to this project did not force that code to be applicable to those properties. Thus, a condition of approval requiring the applicant to maintain this area is not applicable. Additionally, because the code provision does apply irrespective from this review, the applicant contends that because the clear vision area requirement is on a separate private property, it has no bearing on this application or this decision. It stands, again, it can be enforced separately by Deschutes County if so desired on that property. Item number 4. Item number 4 is talks about off-street parking. This is a proposed amendment by the appellant to condition of approval M. It's already included in the county decision. The appellant intends that the last sentence included in his proposal that relates to recycling materials be added to the condition. Although the applicant has no issue with this being added, we don't care. We think it's already covered under the condition. The applicant believes that it is inherently specific in the condition as originally written, and the additional text is not necessary for any enforcement of this condition. It's very specific that we're only allowed to use the parking for the purpose intended, and that would just be extra verbiage in the condition. And item number 5 has to do with owner will implement landscaping plan identified within in the drawings within 1 year of the occupancy of the building. This is inherent in the staff findings and decision and must be completed by the applicant for compliance with the decision. Although it seems unnecessary to add the proposed condition, the applicant has no issue with it if you wanted to add it. Item number 6, the owner will maintain landscaping berms, fences, or other features in a timely manner to ensure the effectiveness of the screening measures. As stated, as I just described under number 5, this proposed condition is also inherent in the staff findings and decision and must be completed by the applicant for compliance with the decision. So we have no choice. It's already part of the decision, part of the conditions. Although, again, it seems unnecessary to add the proposed condition, it adds extra verbiage. Although we have no issue with this, we do have an issue with if it's added for defining the term in a timely manner, because this has to do with landscaping and the environment in Sun River, which is severe with a short growing season. The applicant suggests that if it be deemed necessary to add this condition of approval, that in a timely manner be specified as within 1 year. Item number 7 states that the owner will maintain effective screening, buffering on their property to mitigate visual and noise impacts. The appellant is proposing that a condition of approval be added that states that the owner will maintain effective screening. The applicant believes that the materials submitted to the record and reviewed by staff and is addressed, explained, and approved in the findings and decision are sufficient to mitigate the expected impacts as long as the proposed screening and buffering is maintained as it was approved. So there was ample review by the staff. It was approved, and we agree that we have to construct that and maintain that as it was approved. The appellant's proposed condition, specifically the term effective, is subjective and immeasurable in a definitive manner. The proposed condition makes future interpretation speculative and provides the applicant with no certainty as to what may or may not be required in the future. So we're looking with this decision for certainty and a condition of approval, and a condition that leaves it open-ended in the future does not, allow us to determine, what the cost may be, what it may be. So for this reason, the proposed condition is not appropriate. Number 8 has to request a baseline noise assessment at the owner's property line, conducted within 1 year of occupancy of the building. A noise assessment at the property line or elsewhere on or off the property is not warranted and is impractical. The applicant contends that the project, a new or essentially replacement public works building of typical construction, the structure within a larger public works yard campus, that structure in and of itself will not generate any obtrusive noise from normal features such as HVAC that's contained. The use inside the building that will occur inside the building, staff and vehicles. And again, this is not large, heavy equipment. We have other buildings that have been approved where we have our larger, heavy equipment, where we have repairs will be contained. All of the staff and vehicles will be contained within the structure itself. Much of the vehicle storage and starting and stopping and staging, et cetera, is currently done outside. That's where we're building the new building, and is not contained within any structure. The applicant again contends that by containing these activities inside the building, the noise will be reduced and at least not exacerbated. By containing a noise, typically you muffle that noise. The work outside the building will only include vehicle operation. Again, large heavy equipment is not associated with the use of this structure. It occurs on the property, but not with this structure. And existing staff activities, which occur today outside of the existing building. Although the vehicular circulation pattern has been altered to provide necessary access to the building as it's designed, as shown on the plan, all of these activities currently exist on site in other forms in the same general location and will not be significantly altered as a result of the proposal. Lastly, the normal operating hours of our public works staff are Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. until 4 p.m., which are typical work hours. However, due to the nature of the work emanating from the property, the overall public works yard, the work sometimes demand work outside of typical hours, but only in extreme weather or other circumstances, such as plowing roads, sanding roads. We have, windstorms and trees fall in Sun River. Again, though, these activities currently exist on the site and will not increase due to the new structure. The structure itself is not generating any impacts related to that. A change in the operating activities of the overall public works campus will not occur as a result of this building. Staff believes that the application materials submitted in the staff review and decision resulted in appropriate findings that any noise impacts will not be increased or exacerbated, or will be significantly mitigated due to containment, distance, and the proposed screening. Also, as proposed, the appellant's suggested condition of approval does not provide a threshold of what is or is not acceptable in asking for that measurement. We can assume that it's the county adopted noise regulations, but additionally, there's no mention of what would be required. So let's say, for example, there was, we exceeded the county noise regulations from something related to this building. What type of additional mitigation would be necessary? What cost, what location, what are the impacts on the existing operations if noise regulations were exceeded? But again, I'll go back and rely on the information in the record and the review by staff that again, it's the design, the containment, the distance, proposed screening will adequately mitigate any noise. And so finally, number 9 states that the owner will develop and implement a noise monitoring program to address the concerns of abutting neighbors. For many of the same reasons as that I just listed about the noise study, within a year after construction, a noise monitoring program is not warranted for this standalone single building project. The proposed building is part of a larger public works facility that contains multiple buildings that are taller than what is proposed, contain bay doors. There's heavy equipment use elsewhere. There's fueling, there's repair, there's cinder storage for road maintenance. All structures and uses that have been in place for over 50 years were added with Deschutes County land use approval. A condition as proposed would necessitate an isolation of the specific noise impacts associated with the new building in comparison with all of the other, and this is nearly impossible to accomplish and is also not necessary for the reasons that I stated when I was addressing item number 8. It's adequately mitigated. Notwithstanding the fact that the noise impacts of the proposal will be negligible or non-existent per findings in the staff decision and information in the record, such a requirement has the ability to create a scope of noise analysis that goes beyond those that are specifically related to this project. Again, it would be addressing noise on the whole campus rather than how do we attribute it specifically to this project. So the applicant contends there's no nexus for such that can be drawn from this proposal on the basis that there's no practical way to differentiate between the noise impacts of this proposal and those elsewhere on site and the previous findings that all noise will be adequately mitigated. So in conclusion, we respectfully request that the hearings officer consider this information in light of the appellant specifically requested new or modified 9 conditions of approval. Of the 9 total, we believe that the first 7 are either included or covered by the staff findings and decision, with the exception of some of the specific items that I pointed out that I think the verbiage isn't necessary. And we don't feel that those first 7 really impact this project differently than the existing review and decision with those conditions of approval do. But the final 2, number 8 and 9, regarding the noise, we specifically believe those are not warranted for the reasons that I raised and provided in writing. And so that's it. I would be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. One question I have about the clear vision area. There's the clear visions for the owners on lot 20 and 21 on Quayle Lane. Is there going to be additional traffic impacts from this proposal on those clear vision areas?
No, we that Sun Eagle Lane where it comes into Abbott was actually a little bit more history. As you can see, if you look at the tax map, it's actually part of the lot that we're developing. It was not created by a plat as a dedicated right-of-way or some other common area specifically. It's always been effectively the driveway for the Public Works Department. There's an easement across it to a development to the west, condominium development, and it was actually named Sun Eagle Lane when that project was developed in the early 2000s, about 20 years ago. They needed addresses essentially, so we applied a name, Sun Eagle name. That was the developer of that property. So again, giving you that history, this is the driveway to the Public Works facility for 50 years. This will not lead to any new employees, no new vehicular trips, no new impacts, no change to the traffic pattern. So that clear vision area, again, is not warranted solely by this project.
All right. So on the also these vehicles that will be in this building, where are they currently parked?
They're parked on the north side of the existing building. kind of in a narrowing area that leeds to another part of the
That's the
property.
existing building that's being torn down, or?
That's the building that's being torn down.
Okay.
And
I apologize, I didn't get this from the application. Is it can be completely enclosed when those things, or they're open on one side?
it'll be completely enclosed. It'll have
Garage
bay
doors, right?
bay doors, correct. And so all of that equipment, I have some photos that I can give to you. in
So
rebuttal.
are there, like I said, dump trucks going to be in those, or what kind of vehicles are we talking? Are going to be?
These are smaller pickup trucks. Man, I don't even know how to describe them. Smaller vehicles that we use to get around the community on the bicycle paths, things like that. Snowplow, not the actual blade equipment like that right now sits out in the weather.
Okay, the one thing, I'll just make one comment. I'm familiar with your argument about the first few conditions. And I noticed that in the decision, they have condition A that says this approval is based upon the application, site plan specifications, and supporting documents submitted by the applicant. Any substantial change in this approval will require review through a new land use application. So basically, this is a hard fought thing that local governments came to put this in there, because when you didn't put this condition in, then they changed it and they said, oh, I can change it. And then never conditioned me that I had to build exactly what I built. So basically, by adding this condition, they are requiring them for that whole application that they submit, they're going to do what they said. So it's a good condition to have in, and it will probably, I'll have to consider it and look at it, but I think it probably does take care of those first few points you made.
Yeah, and we believe it takes care of at least the first 7, and just the last 2, 8 and 9. We contend.
All right. Is anybody else from the applicant side going to be testifying at this point?
Not unless we'll reserve them for rebuttal.
Okay, that'll be fine then.
Great. Thank you.
And so let's see now the applicant. So now let's see. Okay, then anybody else in favor, not who is not an applicant? Is anybody signed up on Zoom that's in favor, is not an applicant? Okay, great. Then we're going to now move to the appellant. So the appellant, they got 20 minutes. Mr. Patera.
Actually, all of us.
Okay, all great. I'll let you all come up and take the time and.
How will the slides be available?
Our producer is going to pull up your slides on the screen here, and then you'll be able to click through them.
Ms. Patera, all additional written materials will be considered by me, and there's an opportunity to keep the record open. And again, we're going to have the continued, actually, we don't need to continue. But there will be an opportunity for people to request to keep the record open, submit additional stuff.
Sure, and we will probably do that. Let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Ed Patera. My formal residence is 4382 Northwest Honeysuckle Drive in Corvallis. If you could stay on the first slide, I'd appreciate it. Let's see, I can back up, right? I can back up.
Correct. And just so you're aware, there's sometimes a slight delay with that.
Yep. The neighbors I have with me here will introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kathy Brown and I live at number 9 Quayla.
I'm Marla Swenson. We're at 19 Quayla.
Chuck Swanson, also 19 Quayla.
You?
And we have a few folks on Zoom. And the neighbors have been working together. These are the contributors to the document. And you can see that it's a blend of folks that will clearly have homes in Sun River, but come from other parts of the state or other parts of the country. So the ability to use Zoom is most appreciated. And thank you for accommodating us. This is a little hard because we're listed as being in opposition, but we have perspectives. We're supportive of community improvements. We're supportive of this public works facility. We appreciate the work that's been done in documenting the findings, but we do request improvements in screening findings be reflected in conditions of approval and clarification of records. The the point that you made about the first provision of the condition of approval, that it refers to everything in the document. That's well taken, but I've seen other situations and had experiences where findings were considered just that, findings. They were not enforceable unless they were part of the conditions of approval. So where this comes together is if you can have absolute faith in the findings that they will be followed, then you don't need them in the conditions of approval. If you have concerns that they will be followed, then the request is to put them in the conditions of approval. A simple example is vegetation, maintaining vegetation. I believe you can say you need to put it in. I can't remember the exact quote in this case, but it has provision for putting it in, but not for watering it or maintaining it. So that's really an ineffective finding unless it's backed up by the conclusion that you not only put it in, but you have to water it to maintain it. Simple example.
I appreciate it, Mr. Patera. It's like a belt and suspenders approach on those things.
Yes.
Yes.
And-
Especially when there's been a problem in the past.
Yes, and we'll go through some of those situations. There's a number of those testing types of things that will flow in the conditions of approval that you have included them as findings, but it's the belt and suspenders. Where is it? How is it enforceable? Let me just jump through this really quickly. The way we viewed the project is 2 stories, 13,000 square feet, creates an industrial feel to the residential neighborhood. So we're looking at it a little bit differently. The operations are 200 feet closer to our homes. It creates visual impacts. There are determinations on what's in harmony, interpretations of screening conditions and needs. The noise impacts were discussed in detail. We've also got parking issues, findings reflected in conditions of approval, which we've briefly discussed, and then documentation. That's the other side of the issue on putting things in the conditions of approval. If you go through the documentation closely, you'll find it very hard to distinguish what is a site plan, what is well, let's put it a different way. You'll have a drawing that's called a C2 drawing, and then it'll show up in multiple different uses, and it's not necessarily the same drawing. It seems to be modified and have been used differently. So it's not consistent in all its uses. And I will provide at least one example as backup testimony. The records management, you've already alluded to that it needs, it's been rocky and it's been improving, and we thank you for doing all those things. Let me try to get to quick orientation. What you have here is just illustrating where the neighbors are in relation to the property. This is what the effect is. You asked the question of where is the existing area, and that's at the current vehicle storage at the top of that figure. The drawing that are kind of crude blocks that say the new 225-foot building. And that's just giving you an approximation of, well, things were 310 feet away from their property line. Now the building itself is 130 feet from the property line, but when you add in the apron for these trucks that are supposed to go around the building, that brings it in another 25 feet or so, 24 feet. So we get down to about 106 feet. So there's a concern that there's movement. So that's just a perspective thing. It's not a criteria. Let me try to summarize them here. Can we blow this slide up? Is there a way to do that?
Just find on my screen.
You can read
Okay.
it on yours? Okay.
Right there in front of me.
What you have, there's in the discussions, there are really 2 parts of the of Sun Eagle Lane, which you've just defined. There's a southern part that's between the southern property line and Sun Eagle Lane proper. And then there's the northern side. These are the composite of a southern boundary view of both the south and northern side of Sun Eagle Lane. There's also another summary document that we'll get to, that's Abbott Lane, which hasn't been discussed. This is set up as trying to get a quick summary of what's changed. So on the left side, you have there's a view. There is noise issues, there's screening issues. And this is the current situation is what we have now. And the right-hand side is what our interpretation based on the testimonies that we've heard in presentations we've heard at in Sun River. One thing to point out quickly is the use in noise. We were given information that says this building, the face of the building that points to the homeowners is a larger door, and that's for dump truck sized vehicles, ones used in snow management. And they would be housed in that area. It's not just supposed to be for pickup trucks. That led to a concern because these large trucks can be 18 feet long. We don't have a specific size. The gap on the apron is only about 24 feet. So it starts getting into the question of, if you drive one of these large trucks in and then you have to drive it out, how many times have to go back and forth, et cetera. And really the noise is associated with beepers. It's a safety issue, it has to be there and it's important, but it can be annoying. Can I jump to the end quickly?
Sure.
Just for one point, when we get to noise, and Kathy will help me out on this a little bit. I'll just move this along. And then we'll come back in the presentation. There was a discussion that noise impacts are not needed. And the comments here are a lot of things are being removed. So you're taking vehicles from 300 feet away and bringing them into as close as 130 feet away. They'll be idling with the garage doors open. You know, presumably you're not going to be running vehicles inside all the time. There'll be a chance that some of these 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 doors are going to be open for at least part of the day. Backup operations, there's no requirement they have to be drive-through, so there's backups in all directions. But the important one is the large bay that faces the homes. And
So
this is where I think Kathy
Well,
can help
which
out a
is-
little bit.
the applicant had said that there'll be no large heavy equipment there, but we've been told that the two large doors will house large heavy equipment, which are the snow plows in the wintertime. So not only the one door faces the homeowners on Quayla, the large door. So not only is it a visual problem, but the noise of that door being open and all hours, because it's a snowplow. So they'll come 2 o'clock in the morning and they're so much closer to the homes. So you want to go to the next slide, or should we just wait?
Well, yeah, the key point is that noise from backup cameras, backup beepers can be a problem. The orientation of the building is such that it's pointing this noise at homes. And we'll go to the data from a study that was done at SROA that has been published and made available as part of a previous condition of approval for a prior decision?
So-
Kathy, can you
so-
explain it to
Well,
us
it
a little
looks
bit?
like the noise level increased on the side that is open, which will be when the garage door is open. And it increased, what, 6 dBHs, which is, 60% increase. If it goes 10, it doubles the noise. So it's quite a bit louder. And right now, these vehicles are not seen. They're on the other side. Not only is that round building that's going to be it's going to be demolished. There's a huge berm between it and Sun Eagle. So you can't even see the cars that are parked or anything now. Now we'll have visual and noise close up.
And the point is that the building, yes, it does contain noise if there's something in it. But when you're exiting the building and you can be directing the backup beeper noise in a very focused fashion. Again, this is data from Sun River itself. Let me back up again to that summary. Okay. I think that's Abbott. Let me go up one and focus on the southern boundary. And we'll walk down through more like the presentation, the screening in buffering. As Kathy explained, there was a bunch of things that are being removed, and it's just questionable what's being replaced. For the visual impacts, what's been proposed as a landscaping plan really addresses the narrow area coming off of the building, the 50-foot wide building. I think I have a plan that can show you here. And the point is, if you can look at the end of what looks like a T, a shortened T, the closest part to 20 and 21 Quayla, there's an area that's marked off as landscaping. And that's where the plan is. First point is it's not just what's perpendicular to the building. It's from oblique angles, and you can see this building, or should be able to see this building from 3 other properties. Unfortunately, 2 of those 3 people are not here. They're on Zoom, so it'll be a pickup at some other time.
Well, hopefully they'll be able to testify. We got the Zoom working, so they'll be able.
Okay. Oh, excuse me.
Done.
I've forgotten that.
Yeah.
This is too exciting.
I don't blame you.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you for the time information. We've also gone through the visual impacts in harmony. In the harmony criteria, in the perceptions in the findings of the preserving visual screening, new screening between the proposed structure and Sun Eagle Lane, and a third thing about the integrity of the existing screening. The slides just go through and point out specifics. Screening deficiencies. The strip is narrow. It's 1 to 3. It's 3 to 4 feet at one end. It goes to 12. There are gaps in it. That's the picture. There are areas that were supposed to be landscaped on the north side. It doesn't exist anymore. That's the picture on the left. The picture on the right is the efficacy of a analogous landscaping plan. The need for conditions of approval. This is 3 shots of the same thing. West side of the recycling area. It shows it landscaping condition in 2021. After a complaint was filed, the condition was corrected in 2021 of August. And the right side is where we are now. So the finding can be sure, put in screening, but without anything to back it up, there's a concern based on history that we won't see those improvements. Another one is in a discussion of replying on neighbors. Can you give me the 2-minute warning? Am I down there? Ah, good. Reliance on neighbors. There's a perception that, gee, you walk down that road, it looks awfully green to the south. And then you realize, well, yeah, it is. But that's the picture on the left. That's everything looks nice and green. But you can barely see the fence in there. And really the greenery is coming from people's homes. On the right is trying to follow some of the guidance on your application of drawing some lines so that you clearly see on a photo what we're trying to point out. Those sticks that point up and down are the trees that are on SRO's A side. There may be 2 or 3 deep versus 10 deep on a property owner's side. We're suggesting you not include the property owner's contribution to screening. It's not our problem. Let me move on quickly. Thank you. There was an attempt to just convey that you can do other orientations of this building. This is actually more area and it avoids a whole bunch of issues. We understand the project's in the late stage, but this was an option. It's an unfortunate thing that we didn't communicate as a community ahead of time. Noise impacts, we've gone through this, removals, details, parking. Parking is a consideration. There's a lot of inconsistency between drawings. The left one is one that was submitted that I have no idea what's the context is, but it shows different parking than the right one, which is the official drawing. I think one of the C2 series that identifies parking as employee parking that is currently recycling parking. So the whole, what are you doing with parking argument is unclear. It's kind of outlined there best we can. Noise parking interaction. Here I need some help also. I'd like Chuck to explain things about recycling and
we're at the 20-minute mark.
This will take me,
Okay, you can have a couple minutes to finish up then, please.
we live on 19 Quayle. We've had the home for 19 years and over these 19 years, and we're one of the homes that you see that is most dramatically affected. We over those years, we've seen a very slow gradual increase in the amount of traffic with Sun River maintenance equipment. But by far and away, the most increase is on with the recycling center that is housed on the maintenance department's campus on the south end, right near our homes. That is extremely important that that be addressed. It has nothing to do with tonight, but the parking issue on where these vehicles will park and how they're currently being parked it could very well have an effect on the bulk of the noise pollution, which is from the recycling center. Sun River has, I think, a great rule that I would like to even see it by 8 o'clock, but for work hours from 7 o'clock to 4, 5, 7 to 7, 7 to 7. And I think that they adhere to that very, very well. Unfortunately, Cascade Disposal and does not. Why, I don't know how they slipped through the cracks on this. Marla and I were woke yesterday morning at 6:05 by the trucks, and we went over and visited them, and then they returned at 7:05, and it was nasty. You'll get to see that, Mark. And so if the parking is adhered to, and depending on the design, it could make that go away. And so we're hoping that the parking is designed and adhered to for this new facility that could maybe someday alleviate our much larger problem with noise pollution at the recycling center. It's I can't imagine you guys liking to work around that sound of that glass breaking all the time either. It's pretty annoying. And so the noise issue is my big thing, and anything we can do along these lines and building this building and to alleviate or abate that, or I'd be a happy camper. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Mr. Swenson. I appreciate your brevity and putting that together.
May I have 1 minute of summary?
Okay, 1 minute summary.
The conditions, the page 9, those were written in the context of this is a concept. The wording is, as I'm a layperson, it's just trying to get thoughts down to give examples. It needs to be worked out. We'd be happy to work with Sun River to come up with language that is they're comfortable with. Again, the concern is belt and suspenders. If this is the finding, and this is what your decision is based on, be able to enforce it.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Patera, and I definitely understood that from reading the material. It was just sort of a putting down, this is a problem, there's a potential solution. And I strongly encourage you to work with Mr. Lewis and the
Happy to.
people there to try to, get something that you'd both be happy with. And if we continue that, if the record stays open, you could submit that into the record and we can, the hearings officer would consider that. So I just have a couple of comments and questions on your presentation. So I will ask the applicant to, specify the site plan of what, to clarify it for everybody here, what is actually going to be the actual site plan. If there's any, to remove any confusion about that. And also to address the two large doors on the building and what's going to be going in there and out of there. And I understand, this is going to be these vehicles will be in the building, so they'll be going in and out, but at least, a lot of the stuff will be inside a building. And then also you made some comments about the owner's property. Then they have my understanding of homeowners association rules in Sun River. You have to have trees in your property. You can't cut them down. You have to cut down for ladders and
There's some
whatnot.
properties that don't have any trees, you get permission for cutting them down.
Right.
If you're a property owner, and that's supposedly, I'm sure it applies to the organization themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
There's another glitch in there, and that's called the ladder fuels reduction
Right.
plan.
Familiar with that.
And that's being new. It's a wonderful plan, but being new, I don't know how it's going to work out. So some of the screening that's been proposed and also the screening that's existing may have to change.
And I'll also ask the applicant on rebuttal, hopefully you could discuss that recycling center parking issue for them. So, okay, that's all the comments I have at this point. Let's move on to our next part of the hearing. So we're going to have other people here who are in opposition testify. And I think those are the people who will be on Zoom.
At this time, we'll ask anyone who's joining us via Zoom who would like to testify in opposition to the application to please use the raise hand feature.
Okay, we just some people listening, but they're not interested in testifying at this point. Okay, and then so next we go to people who are neither favor or against the application. Any neutral testimony from Zoom?
No.
Okay, then we have an opportunity for the applicant to rebut if they wish. Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you. A couple things. I was trying to take notes fast there in 20 minutes. First is we'd like to point out that with regard to the discussion of that it's an industrial use, the zoning is appropriate for the use intended, and the overall use of the site has been there, like I said, for over 50 years since Sun River was first beginning to be developed. Also, the second point is we are very conscious, and our public works director, who's in the audience today, Mark Smith, met with the owners last night. We discussed landscaping. We have a history in Sun River. We're big on landscaping in Sun River.
Very nice.
Big on retention of trees. We're big on our ladder fuel reduction. And we do have specific requirements regarding retention of landscaping. We have and landscaping, and we have our own design review committee that you don't want to go in front of them. I'll just point that out. But that said, we have a landscape plan that's part of the record. That landscape plan that's part of the record shows that there is a berm on that south side of the building. It's a 3.5-foot berm. We have a maximum height of how tall we allow berms in Sun River, so that we don't create these big bermed walls everywhere. So there's a fine line, and that is a planted berm. And some of the photos that were showing existing landscaping, one of those was for a cinder shed that was approved back in 2020. Went through the site plan review process here. There was extensive landscaping requirement. That landscaping has been installed. We had some things that died. That happens in Sun River. They've been replanted. We constantly, we're maintaining our landscaping. Some of the other berms that were noted that were deficient, I'm speaking from pure ignorance going back, and this is the reason why that condition A is on the condition of approval. Is it was pointed out to us that we weren't meeting that condition, so we went back and we reestablished the berms to meet that condition. Part of that is I've been there 3.5 years. Mark's been there, our public works director, for 12, 13 years, and it goes way, way back. So again, brought to our attention, we corrected that situation. Also, with regard to the landscaping and the buffering, there is no requirement that it be completely obscured. Again, it just needs to be buffered.
Right, Mr. Lewis, the standard is that it be designed, located, and buffered or screened to minimize adverse impacts on the site of neighboring properties. That's
Correct.
the condition that, the standard that your neighbors are concerned about.
Exactly. And so therefore, what we submitted to the record was to retain as much existing vegetation as possible, to create the berm, to plant new landscaping in that area, to create and enhance that existing vegetation. As was pointed out, and I will submit to the record here, I show some views, not from the properties themselves toward this site, but again, I also would like to point out that some of the photos that you saw there were from the Sun Eagle Lane adjacent to the property. They weren't from the owner's properties themselves. So I have some photos I'll submit to the record here that show, and they're labeled. You can see where they are in relation to the building and in relation to the views. There is significant vegetation that is in the backyards, as was pointed out. And there are requirements that if you want to remove that vegetation, you need to get permit through SROA. And specifically, if it doesn't meet criteria, it's not diseased, it's not, dying, it's not too close to the home. Right now, and we do inspections of properties every year. We do a cycle. We do half the community one year and half the community the next year. Those trees, many of those trees are ponderosa pine trees that are 25 and 30 feet tall. None of those were found that they needed to be removed. If they were proposed to be removed, they would more than likely not be allowed to be removed. So they will be retained, even on the neighbors' properties, to help buffer and mitigate. And again, I will rely on our landscaping plan. Additionally, the site plan we have, I'm going to rely on what's in the record. There was a question. We submitted a final site plan that's referenced in the decision in terms of the size of the building. And you asked what is going in and out of the building. What's going in and out of the building are smaller vehicles and equipment. I think Mr. Smith, our public works director, addressed some of the owners last night and said, this is our only heated building. So only in cases of extreme where we get like 5 below and below, would we need to bring in some of the larger equipment that does not, it just can't sit out. So again, we put those inside of some of our existing buildings today. They're not heated. So they stay warmer than -5, but they're not a heated building. So that would be relatively non-existent a couple times a year. Also, to discuss the retaining trees and the parking and the recycling center. We have existing recycling center. There really isn't, it's kind of like a pull up and drop off. There isn't like you're parking there like a parking spot and staying there for extended periods of time. Get out, throw your stuff in the containers, and then drive away. The parking spaces that you see on the site plan that were shown, those are existing striped parking spaces. They were approved as part of this question was asked with our cinder shed application 3 years ago. And so it's addressed not only in that application and that decision, it's also addressed in this application and this decision. So it was found to meet the standards, it was found to meet the number, and it was found to meet the location where safe access for the employees to get to this new building as well as other buildings.
So remind me, was there any changes to this application of that recycling center?
None.
Parking.
The recycling center, no. So this parking, again, that we're talking, the actual striped parking spaces is for the employees that work on site. The recycling center itself, again, has a drop-off drive-through. You get out and you throw your stuff in. And that goes back to how it's been in place for, oh gosh, 25, 30 years. So there is no change to the parking. And again, I'd like to point out, it was addressed in, I don't have the application number, but for our cinder shed 3 years ago, it's the same parking. And again, like I pointed out earlier, we're not adding any new staff. We're not creating any new trips. So it's just a larger building, a better building. And we can house our equipment that currently sits outside there. One other thing I'd like to point out, there's some comparisons to the existing building, existing berm, existing landscaping. When you do a site plan review, the staff looks at it, we addressed it as if it was a vacant site. It had native vegetation, it had vegetation on it. So we look at it as if it were a vacant site, hadn't been developed with any structure that we're looking to tear down. So we looked at it, we're building a new building. How do we prepare a landscape plan? How do we prepare a circulation plan as if it's a raw site? And how do we take into consideration all the relevant criteria with regard to buffering, screening, mitigating? With regard to noise, again, I addressed that earlier and it's addressed in the findings. We have bay doors in there. We have bay doors in our existing buildings where we do have large dump trucks and we have large equipment. They have bay doors that face residential areas as well. So, we would contend, and one of those is right across the parking lot, right across the access aisle from this newly proposed building. And so, we don't leave them up. It's a fairly low key public works yard.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. This is just a question I have. Was this discussed in the homeowners association meetings? Was there a controversy over this or?
We as part of our, we also have to meet all of our own design review standards. So we had to submit an application to our design committee. We were required to have a public meeting. We had a public meeting on February 22nd. We had some of the same folks here ask some of the same questions. We answered those questions. That led to some of the comment letters that are in the record. We addressed those. Again, just last night, our public works director met with the folks that you see here testifying.
Yes, we arranged a meeting. It took us a long time, but we finally got there. Apologies. It would have been better if it were a month previous.
Well, I appreciate that. Again, I encourage you both for, they're your members and you're the association. And hopefully if you could get together on some mutually agreeable conditions of approval that would make you both happy. And then I can look at those, make sure they're legally sound and review those.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And so on that note, I'll complete my rebuttal, but I'm going to submit a couple things to the record. One is the photos and the site plan showing the views. The other is a copy of the Quayla Estates plat, which shows, and I have them highlighted on here, the adjoining what is now called Sun Eagle Lane and the corporation yard in place at that time, and that it was a driveway, and that ultimately the Aquila Lodges, which are to the west, which then reference it as Sun Eagle Lane. And that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody in the audience want to keep the record open for additional submittals? Okay. This is a chance to submit additional conditions of approval for 7 days. So we keep the, so you want to, okay. Okay. Miss Baker, is it? Brown, I'm sorry, I got the B right. So, okay, so let's keep the record open for 7 days until June 13th at 4 p.m. And then, so anybody can submit information at that point. And then there's going to be a 7-day rebuttal period of that, which, so let's say appellant submit some information, new information, and then the applicants get to rebut that. And then the final 7 days is open till June 27th for the applicant to submit any final argument. You don't have to do any of those things, but that's a way the process is set up. So again, this whole hearing process, the applicant just has the burden of proof, so they have the most opportunities to make their argument. So that's what we're going to do, and all submittal should be submitted to me, Alan Rapelier, through Miss Stewart over there, and her email should be as a matter of record.
Correct. So I do have some notes on the open record period. First, I would like to confirm that the applicant does agree to that 777 open record period.
So again, just to make sure it's the first 7 days till the 13th is for anyone to submit.
Correct. So the first 7 days would be an open record period. So that would be until 4 p.m. on Tuesday, June 13th. And that's for anyone to submit any new evidence and testimony. The rebuttal period would be the following 7 days. So that would end at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, June 20th. And that is for people to submit rebuttal testimony that responds to things that are already.
Yeah, that's no new evidence. Only the stuff that's, yeah.
Correct. And then the final 7 days is that final legal argument. So that would end on Tuesday, June 27th at 4 p.m. And that is just for the applicant to submit their final legal argument.
No evidence whatsoever, just arguments.
And then all submittals should be can be sent to me. My email address is audrey.stewart@deschutes.org. I want to note that the county does not retrieve information from a website link or personal cloud storage device. It's your responsibility to submit all evidence and testimony you want the hearings officer to consider. And then please don't wait until the last minute. All materials need to be received by the county server by 4 p.m. So you want to make sure that everything is
That is a strict timeline.
correct.
Let me ask Ms. Stewart if there's any final comments you have for this tonight's hearing.
Correct. I did have a couple closing staff comments. The first is I wanted to note the noticing concerns were brought up during testimony. So there were suggestions to sort of change either the timing of the mailing or the appeal period. So our procedures come from Title 22 of Deschutes County Code, which is our procedures ordinance. And so we're required to follow the same mailing procedure, appeal procedure for all applications. So changes to that would require an application for a text amendment. One concern the appellants did bring up to me is that with delays with receiving mail, that sometimes there wasn't enough time to respond to things. And then there was also a concern regarding the full findings and decision not being mailed out to interested parties. And I want to note that it's a standard practice that a notice of decision or is mailed out to interested parties, and the full findings and decision is available on the website, and it's generally only sent to the applicant.
That's statewide, pretty much.
Yeah. And then I had two other points. One, there was some discussion about the various versions of the site plan and what was submitted. So I wanted to note the final version of the site plan was submitted on March 29th, and that was attached as an attachment to the findings and decision. And so my staff report, its condition of approval V references that as the final site plan. And then the landscaping plan, it's called out also in the staff report that a version submitted on March 21st was the final version. And one thing staff wanted to offer is that to avoid any confusion, that could be an attachment to the hearings officer decision to clear up any questions about what the final version of those is. And then third, there was some discussion about the 2019 approval for the cinder storage building. So that is file 247-19-000-450 SP. And I referenced that several times in my staff report. It's available on dial, but staff would like to offer to add that to the record so that it's available in the record for this application.
Just for clarification, so, Ms. Stewart, the March 29th site plan that you believe would be the final one, and that's one you would recommend that I attach to my decision.
So the March 29th site plan is already attached to the findings and
Right.
decision. So that is the binding, what the county views as the binding site plan. There was some question, the landscaping plan, the final version was submitted on March 21st. And that's called out in the staff report as the final date, but that final landscaping plan was not included as an attachment. So perhaps we could, for the hearings officer decision, include that as well.
Okay, for the landscaping plan. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, I think that's it for this evening. So we're gonna keep the record open as we described, and again, we're done with the oral testimony. And I appreciate your attendance and your participation tonight. Thank you very much. Okay.